January 28, 2026, 2:47 a.m. Belgorod Oblast, Russia. 3,000 soldiers, 40 armored vehicles, ammunition trucks loaded to capacity, all packed into a wooded staging area 15 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. By 2:59 a.m., the woods were burning. This is the story of how Ukrainian HIMARS crews dismantled a major Russian offensive before it ever crossed the border. 12 minutes, 12 rockets, one of the most devastating precision strikes of the entire war. I'm your host at Ukraine Signal, where we analyze the battles that change wars. And this battle, if you can even call it that, changed everything Russia thought it knew about massing forces near Kharkiv. Let's start with why 3,000 Russian soldiers were hiding in the trees in the first place. By late January 2026, the war's front lines had shifted into a grinding equilibrium. Russia was pushing hard on the Pokrovsk axis in Donetsk Oblast, throwing wave after wave of infantry and armor at Ukrainian defensive positions. The cost was staggering. Hundreds of vehicles lost per month, thousands of soldiers killed or wounded every week. But Russia had bodies to spend, and the Kremlin demanded progress. The problem was Kharkiv. Ukraine's second-largest city sat roughly 30 kilometers from the Russian border, and Ukrainian forces in the region had been launching increasingly effective cross-border strikes. HIMARS rockets, drone swarms, and artillery were hitting Russian logistics nodes inside Belgorod Oblast with growing frequency. Russian commanders needed a solution. Their answer was Operation North Wind. At least, that's the name intercepted by Ukrainian signals intelligence. The concept was straightforward. Mass a significant force near the border. Launch a cross-border incursion toward the town of Vovchansk. Force Ukraine to pull reserves north from Pokrovsk to defend Kharkiv. Relieve pressure on the Donetsk front. On paper, it made sense. In practice, it required doing something that has been suicidal since 2022. Concentrating large numbers of troops and vehicles in one location within range of Ukrainian precision weapons. The 138th Motor Rifle Brigade received the order on January 24th. Elements of the brigade began moving from their garrison positions deeper inside Belgorod Oblast, traveling at night along secondary roads to avoid satellite detection. They were reinforced with a tank company from the 4th Guards Tank Division, 10 T-72B3 tanks, freshly repaired at the Uralvagonzavod plant. Artillery batteries followed. BM-21 Grad multiple launch rocket systems, self-propelled 2 S-19 EMSTA howitzers, ammunition trucks carrying everything from 152mm shells to anti-tank missiles. By January 27th, the staging area was packed. Russian commanders had chosen a wooded zone roughly 4 kilometers long and 1 kilometer deep, bisected by a dirt road that connected to the M2 highway. Trees provided concealment from above, or so they believed. Ukrainian intelligence had been watching from the moment the first convoy left its garrison. The detection chain started with signals intelligence. Ukraine's electronic warfare units, many of them trained by NATO specialists and equipped with Western-supplied intercept systems, picked up a surge in Russian military communications across the Belgorod region starting January 25th. Cell phone traffic from Russian soldiers spiked. Encrypted radio channels showed unusual activity patterns consistent with large-scale troop movements. Then came the satellites. Commercial satellite imagery, purchased from Western providers and analyzed by Ukrainian military intelligence, showed vehicle tracks appearing in the wooded area south of Belgorod. Thermal signatures were consistent with running engines and field kitchens. The footprint was enormous. Which weapon system was deadlier in this engagement? A. HIMARS. B. Artillery. C. Drones. Drop your answer in the comments, but the confirmation came from an unexpected source. A Ukrainian deep penetration reconnaissance drone, a modified Leleka 100, operating at high altitude along the border, captured real-time video of the staging area on the evening of January 27th. The footage was remarkable. Rows of armored vehicles parked under camouflage netting that was visibly insufficient. Soldiers milling around cooking fires. Ammunition trucks lined up with almost no dispersal between them. It looked like a Soviet-era military textbook illustration of how to stage forces for an offensive. It also looked like a target. Ukrainian military intelligence, the GUR, compiled the assessment overnight. 3,000 plus personnel, approximately 40 armored vehicles, including tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and armored personnel carriers. At least 12 artillery systems, 3 to 5 ammunition trucks, fuel tankers, command vehicles with communications equipment, all concentrated in an area small enough to be covered by a single HIMARS fire mission. The assessment reached the desk of the commanding general of Ukraine's Joint Forces operation by 1 a.m. on January 28th. The decision was made within the hour. Authorization for the HIMARS strike came at 2:31 a.m. Now here's where the tactical genius becomes clear. Russian planners had chosen their staging area based on one critical assumption, that it was beyond effective HIMARS range from Ukrainian firing positions. Standard GMLRS rockets, the M31 guided munitions fired by the M142 HIMARS launcher, have a maximum range of approximately 84 kilometers. The staging area sat roughly 95 kilometers from the nearest known Ukrainian positions in Kharkiv Oblast. The Russians calculated wrong. Stay with me, because what happens in the next 12 minutes destroys an entire brigade's combat capability. Ukrainian HIMARS crews had been repositioning for days. 4 M142 launchers, each a 6-wheeled armored truck carrying a pod of 6 GMLRS rockets, had moved forward under cover of darkness to pre-surveyed firing positions in northern Kharkiv Oblast. These positions were carefully selected, close enough to the border to put the Russian staging area within range, far enough from known Russian reconnaissance drone patrol routes to avoid detection, adjacent to hard surface roads for rapid displacement after firing. The crews had rehearsed this exact scenario. Ukrainian doctrine, developed through bitter experience and refined with American advisory support, called for what's known as a shoot and scoot engagement. Fire the rockets, relocate immediately. Be gone before Russian counter-battery radar can calculate the launch point and respond. At 2:42 a.m., the 4 HIMARS launchers rolled into their firing positions. Engines running, pods elevated, target coordinates loaded from a secure data link connected to the Ukrainian Artillery Command Network. The coordinates had been verified 3 times, by satellite imagery, by drone footage, and by signals intelligence triangulation. At 2:47 a.m., the first launcher fired. An M31 GMLRS rocket weighs approximately 300 pounds. It accelerates off the launch rail with a solid fuel motor that pushes it to speeds exceeding Mach 2.5. Each rocket carries a 200-pound unitary warhead, a single high-explosive charge designed to penetrate light armor and detonate with devastating fragmentation effect. The guidance system combines GPS satellite navigation with an inertial measurement unit, giving it a circular error probable of roughly 2 meters. 2 meters, at 80+ kilometers. The first salvo consisted of 6 rockets from 2 launchers, fired in rapid succession over approximately 45 seconds. They arced into the night sky, climbing to altitude before tipping over and descending on ballistic trajectories toward the staging area. Time of flight at maximum range, approximately 90 seconds. The Russians had no warning. Their air defense systems, S-300 batteries positioned further north to protect Belgorod city, were oriented against aircraft and cruise missiles, not ballistic rockets arriving on steep descent trajectories at terminal velocities exceeding Mach 3. Even if they had detected the incoming rockets, reaction time for the S-300 system against a GMLRS class target is effectively 0 at that range. At 2:48 a.m. and approximately 30 seconds, the first rockets impacted. The targeting was precise. The initial salvo struck the vehicle park, the area where armored vehicles and trucks were concentrated. 6 rockets hit within a zone roughly 200 meters by 100 meters. Each warhead detonated with a blast radius lethal to exposed personnel within 50 meters and capable of penetrating the top armor of a T-72 tank. The effect was catastrophic. 3 ammunition trucks took direct hits or were struck by fragmentation. The first truck detonated instantly, sending a column of fire 200 meters into the air. The explosion was visible on satellite thermal sensors within minutes. The second and third trucks ignited in chain reactions, their loads of artillery shells and rocket propellant cooking off in a sustained series of explosions that would continue for 6 hours. Armored vehicles that weren't destroyed outright caught fire. Fuel tanks ruptured. Reactive armor tiles on T-72s detonated, sending shrapnel in all directions. Soldiers who had been sleeping in or near the vehicles were caught in the open. 18 seconds after the first salvo impacted, the second salvo arrived. How many vehicles did Ukraine ultimately destroy in this strike? A 15, B 22, C 34? The answer comes at the end. The second salvo, 6 more rockets from the remaining 2 launchers, targeted the eastern portion of the staging area, where intelligence had placed the command vehicles and artillery batteries. The rockets walked across the tree line with mechanical precision. One struck within meters of what post-strike analysis would identify as a mobile command post, likely a BTR-80 fitted with communications equipment. The vehicle was obliterated. Self-propelled howitzers, their barrels still pointed east for the planned offensive, were hit while parked. A 2S-19 MSTA, a 42-ton self-propelled gun worth approximately $3 million, took a near-direct hit that blew the turret off its hull ring. 2 BM-21 Grad launchers, their 40 rocket pods still loaded, detonated in a spectacular chain reaction that shredded everything within a 100-meter radius. The entire engagement, from the first rocket launch to the last impact, lasted under 3 minutes. But the killing wasn't over. Russian soldiers who survived the initial salvos did what any human beings would do under precision bombardment. They ran. Hundreds of troops scattered from the burning woods into the surrounding agricultural fields. Some fled north toward Belgorod. Some fled east. Some simply ran in whatever direction seemed away from the explosions. Subscribe to Ukraine Signal. If you want to understand how modern warfare actually works, they ran straight into the drones. Ukrainian drone teams had been pre-positioned along the border specifically for this scenario. Multiple teams operating Mavic series reconnaissance drones and custom-built FPV attack drones were airborne before the HIMARS rockets even launched. Their mission was exploitation, to identify and engage any forces that survived the initial strike. The first drone team, operating from a concealed position roughly 8 kilometers south of the border, had its surveillance drones orbiting at altitude. Thermal cameras turned the fleeing soldiers into bright white figures against the cold January ground. The operators began cataloging targets and directing FPV attack drones. An FPV drone costs roughly $500. It carries a modified RPG warhead, or a small shaped charge. It flies at speeds up to 140 kilometers per hour. And in the hands of an experienced Ukrainian operator, it almost never misses. The drone teams worked methodically through the pre-dawn hours. Small groups of Russian soldiers attempting to regroup in a farmhouse, an FPV drone through the window. A T-72 that had survived the initial strike and was attempting to reverse out of the tree line. 2 FPV drones in succession, one to the engine deck, one to the turret ring. An ammunition truck trying to flee west on the dirt road. A single drone to the cab, sending the vehicle careening into a ditch where its cargo subsequently detonated. By 4 a.m., the staging area and its surroundings were an inferno. Secondary explosions continued to ripple through the woods as ammunition cooked off. Vehicle hulks burned with a particular orange-black smoke of diesel fuel and rubber. Russian emergency radio traffic, intercepted in real time by Ukrainian signals intelligence, painted a picture of total chaos. Fragments of intercepted communications, later released by Ukrainian intelligence, revealed the scope of the disaster. A battalion commander repeatedly calling for medical evacuation helicopters that never came. A logistics officer reporting that all 3 ammunition trucks were destroyed and all reserve stocks lost. A frantic radio exchange in which a company commander reported he could account for fewer than 40 of his 200-man unit. The 4 Ukrainian HIMARS launchers, meanwhile, had displaced from their firing positions within 3 minutes of launching their rockets. By the time Russian counter-battery radar, assuming it was even operational in the chaos, could have calculated launch points, the launchers were already kilometers away, rolling south on pre-planned routes to reload positions. They would fire again before dawn, this time targeting Russian reinforcement routes. If you believe tactics win wars, type Ukraine Signal in the comments. By sunrise on January 28th, the scope of the destruction was becoming clear even to Russian sources. Several prominent Russian military telegram channels, normally reliable mouthpieces for Kremlin talking points, reported what they euphemistically called heavy losses during repositioning of forces in the Belgorod area. One channel, known for its connections to the Russian General Staff, acknowledged that a staging area had been struck, but blamed the losses on a Ukrainian agent providing targeting coordinates. The implication was that this was espionage, not a systemic failure of Russian operational security. Ukrainian General Staff issued a more specific assessment that afternoon. The strike, and subsequent drone exploitation had destroyed at least 22 armored vehicles, including 7 tanks, 9 infantry fighting vehicles, and 6 armored personnel carriers. 3 ammunition trucks were confirmed destroyed. Multiple artillery systems were knocked out. Personnel casualties were assessed at between 300 and 400 killed or severely wounded, with an unknown but significant number of additional troops suffering moderate injuries, burns, or concussive effects. The material cost was staggering. Conservative estimates place the value of destroyed equipment at over $60 million. The ammunition losses alone, thousands of artillery shells, hundreds of rockets, anti-tank missiles, small arms ammunition, represented weeks of production and logistics effort. But the strategic cost was even higher. The planned Kharkiv incursion, Operation North Wind, was postponed indefinitely. Russian commanders could not replace the destroyed vehicles and ammunition quickly enough to maintain the timeline. More importantly, the strike shattered confidence in the fundamental assumption underlying the operation, that forces could be safely concentrated near the border. What would NATO have done differently with the same intelligence? Comment your analysis below. This is the central lesson of January 28th, and it's a lesson Russia has been taught repeatedly since February 2022, but refuses to learn. In the era of precision-guided munitions, satellite surveillance, signals intelligence, and ubiquitous drones, force concentration is death. The old Soviet doctrine of massing overwhelming force at a single point, the doctrine that won at Kursk in 1943 and that Russian generals still study at their staff academies, does not work when the enemy can see everything and strike anything within minutes. Ukraine has understood this from the beginning. Ukrainian forces operate in small, dispersed units. They use concealment and constant movement. They rely on distributed networks of sensors, drones, satellites, electronic intercept systems, human intelligence, rather than en masse. And when they strike with precision weapons that multiply the effect of small forces against large ones. This is what American military theorists call the reconnaissance strike complex, the ability to detect a target, process the intelligence, decide on a response, and deliver precision fires faster than the enemy can react. On January 28th, the Ukrainian reconnaissance strike cycle, from initial satellite detection to HIMARS impact, was measured in hours. The final kill chain, from fire mission authorization to rockets on target, was 12 minutes. 12 minutes to dismantle an offensive that had taken Russia weeks to prepare. The HIMARS system itself deserves particular attention. The M142 high-mobility artillery rocket system was originally designed for the United States Marine Corps as a lighter, more mobile alternative to the larger M27 OMLRS. It mounts a single 6-rocket pod on a 5-ton truck chassis, giving it the ability to fire and relocate at highway speeds. The system entered service in 2005, but it was Ukraine that proved its true combat potential. Since the first HIMARS deliveries in summer 2022, the system has become the backbone of Ukrainian deep strike capability. HIMARS rockets have destroyed Russian ammunition depots, command posts, bridges, air defense systems, and troop concentrations across the entire front. Russian forces have tried everything to counter it: electronic jamming, decoy targets, dispersal of logistics nodes, hunt missions with reconnaissance drones. Nothing has worked consistently. The reason is simple. The HIMARS is designed to be invisible. It fires from concealed positions, displaces within minutes, and can be reloaded and ready to fire again within 10 minutes. It doesn't need to be near the front line. It doesn't need air superiority. It just needs coordinates. On January 28th, it had very good coordinates. Real tactics. Real consequences. Ukraine signal. There's another dimension to this engagement that deserves analysis: the role of combined arms integration. The HIMARS strike alone would have been devastating, but the pre-positioning of drone teams to exploit the aftermath transformed a precision artillery strike into a comprehensive kill zone. Russian forces that survived the rockets were engaged by drones. Forces that evaded the drones faced the possibility of follow-on HIMARS strikes against their retreat routes. This layered approach, long-range precision fires followed by persistent drone surveillance and attack, represents a new model of warfare that Ukraine has essentially invented under combat conditions. No military academy taught this doctrine before 2022. No NATO exercise practiced it at this scale. Ukraine developed it through trial, error, and an extraordinary willingness to innovate under existential pressure. The drone operators who participated in the January 28th engagement exemplify this innovation. These are soldiers, many of them former civilians with backgrounds in technology, gaming, or engineering, who have become the most cost-effective combat force in military history. A single drone operator with a $500 FPV drone can destroy a $3 million tank. A team of 4 operators can hold a sector that would traditionally require an infantry company. On the morning of January 28th, Ukrainian drone teams operating along the Kharkiv border engaged at least 14 additional targets in the hours following the HIMARS strike. Their work was precise, methodical, and devastating, and their total equipment cost for the operation was less than the price of a single one of the rockets they were supplementing. The Russian response in the days following the strike was revealing. Rather than acknowledging the operational failure, Russian military leadership blamed the losses on Ukrainian intelligence penetration, implying that spies, not superior tactics, were responsible. This narrative served a dual purpose. It deflected blame from the commanders who ordered the concentration, and it justified a purge of personnel suspected of disloyalty. Within a week, Russian military police arrested several junior officers and enlisted soldiers in the Belgorod garrison on suspicion of providing information to Ukrainian intelligence. Whether any of these individuals were actually informants is unknown. What is known is that the arrests did nothing to address the actual problem, that Russian operational security is fundamentally compromised by Ukraine's multi-layered intelligence collection capabilities. Satellite imagery taken 3 days after the strike showed the staging area still smoldering. Vehicle hulks were visible as dark shapes against the snow. Crater patterns confirmed the precision of the GMLRS impacts. The tree line that had provided concealment was largely destroyed, either burned or shattered by blast effects. Now, the answer to our earlier question. How many vehicles did Ukraine destroy? The answer is B, at least 22 confirmed, including tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, artillery systems, and trucks. The actual number may be higher, as some vehicles were so thoroughly destroyed that identification from satellite imagery was difficult. So here are the questions that matter. Was the Russian decision to concentrate 3,000 troops in a single staging area a fatal miscalculation, or did they simply have no better option given the offensive timeline? Could Russian air defense and electronic warfare assets have detected and intercepted the HIMARS rockets if they had been properly positioned and alert? What would you have done differently, as either the Russian commander planning the offensive or the Ukrainian commander planning the response? Subscribe to Ukraine Signal, because we break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. The woods south of Belgorod are quiet now. The fires have burned out. The wreckage has been partially cleared, though scorch marks and craters remain visible from above. Somewhere in a Ukrainian forward operating base, HIMARS crews are conducting maintenance on their launchers, preparing for the next fire mission. Somewhere in a Russian garrison, replacement troops are being briefed on an offensive that no longer exists. 12 rockets, 12 minutes, one lesson that never gets old. Modern warfare punishes concentration without mercy. Stay vigilant.